Welcome to Human Factors Cast, your weekly podcast for all things human factors, psychology, and design.
Well, it certainly feels good to be back in the podcasting seat, Blake.
Woo! We're already here.
We are back. It's episode 112. Today is November 26, 2018. We're back from the Thanksgiving here in the States. We do that thing, the Black Friday. Today is Cyber Monday. Happy Cyber Monday to you.
It's such a weird concept to me still, Cyber Monday.
I know, it's where you meet random strangers on the internet, and let's not talk about that. So, hey, I'm your host, Nick Roome. I'm joined today by Blake Arnsdorff. We got some stuff to talk about today. There's a lot of news happening while we were on our, I guess, 2-week hiatus, 1-week hiatus. I don't know. You and Elise did a fantastic job while I was out, and then we had the week off for Thanksgiving. So it's been a hot minute since we've been in this seat, but we're here. We're going to break down some news stories, including this story about AI chatbots to give people that have died an afterlife or life after death. We're going to take a look at how virtual reality could transform prototyping. And Google's made this patent for these omnidirectional VR sneakers.
Ooh, that's so crazy sounding to me.
I'm going to have a good time with that one. And then we got the world's first research center to improve Canadians' air travel experience.
Well, yes, I love that one.
But first, we have to get into some stuff. Welcome, new listeners. We took a break, and now we're back, so welcome. You can find us on YouTube every Tuesday. There's a little bit of a delay. Like, subscribe, do all that. I'm tired of begging for it. We need 100 people.
We need 40 more.
Oh, we're that close.
Yep.
Are you sure? Because you made
I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure that we're close.
Hey, if you took a listen to our HFES 2018 coverage in our time off because you had nothing better to do, we do have an audience survey. Link is in the description. We're still trying to figure out whether or not you like those things, whether or not you want to hear more of our traditional coverage of those events.
40 more.
40 more. All right. I need 40 of you listening. We know how many of you listen to the show. We need 40 of you to go hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That would help us out. Let's see here. What else we got? Oh, yeah. Thanks for launching off that HFES membership giveaway.
Oh, yeah. I'm super excited about that one.
Yeah, me too. So that's an annual membership to HFES. That means you'll get the journal. That means you'll get access to all the online resources on the HFES website, connections to others, and discounted rates to the annual meeting as well. So,
I forgot that was even a part of it. That's
hey,
awesome.
Look at that. It's almost as if I have them prepared in bullet notes here.
No, you don't.
I don't.
You know all these things off the top of your head. You're a good HFESer.
Hey, check that out. And additionally, the link to that is in the description. There's a variety of ways to enter. You can join us on the Slack. If you're already a Slack member, just go ahead and say, I'm already a member, and provide us with your name. You can leave us a review. You can follow us on Twitter. There's a bunch of different ways that you can enter. Please go check that out. I feel like that's a pretty high-ticket item. We're working closely with HFES to make sure that happens for you. So please go check that out. That's cool. I like that.
It's awesome.
And I think that ends soonish. I think it's mid-December that we're closing it out. I think the 15th is when we're going for 16th. So that way we can announce it on the 17th. Yeah, that sounds right. Anyway, time is running short, so you got half a month to go in and enter that thing, so please do. You know what's coming up this week, Blake?
What is?
You know.
I do?
HFES Australia.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's going to be so fun to talk to a good friend of ours.
Our good buddy Mateo's out there getting all the deets from HFES Australia. He's going to be on the show in a separate episode. We'll do a separate kind of bonus episode to kind of cover all the fun stories that are coming out of HFES in Australia this year out of Perth. But it's never too soon to start looking forward to some other things. So we got the Healthcare Symposium coming up next year, which I'm hoping that we'll be able to go. Maybe.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm hoping so.
We're trying to set some stuff up, it looks like.
Trying to figure it out. We also got IEEE, Chi, you name it. There's a billion of our conferences out there. Please go check them out. Find something that interests you and go. It's always a ton of fun to go. And if you're going to something, let us know. We're happy to at least have you on the show so you can talk about your experience. So yeah, thanks. We're back from Thanksgiving. And Blake, I want to know what's going on with you.
Man, so much traveling over the past week. I felt like I flew all over Florida and every place and its mom. But I have to say, the reason I got excited about this last story that we have, so trying to improve Canadians' travel experience. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be something taken up by that particular group that's doing research, but I found doing the electronic boarding pass for, I'm not going to mention the airlines because I don't feel like that's fair, but I felt like the steps and the process that are built into like this little touchscreen interface you have to deal with, I counted, and before I could actually print and get to my boarding pass, I had to go through 20 separate screens.
20 separate screens to print out your boarding pass.
Yes. And I think part of it...
So it's easy.
It was really easy. I could probably do it with my eyes closed. No, it was just one of these things where it's funny. It's funny to see where, like, as a human factors person, or probably even as a UX designer or UX researcher, where you run into these instances in the real world where it's like it's something you don't work with, something you're not really super involved with, but you see an opportunity for something to be fixed, and you wonder how do you even get your feedback out there.
Right.
So that's one thing that I enjoyed but was frustrated by during the holidays was the entire travel experience has still got a lot of work to do, but especially the interfaces that you have to work with in order to even just get your boarding passes or any of that stuff.
We have a colleague who travels frequently.
Sure.
And whenever they experience problems with some sort of interface issue or issue with the whole travel experience, they write a user story and send it in as feedback. So they say, as a user, I would like to get to my boarding pass in 3 steps or less, so that I can quickly get my boarding pass and board my plane.
Yeah.
So they go on and write a full user story for something like that. So maybe that's a way you can.
That's probably the way
feedback.
to go. Because I nerded out on my last day because I was traveling by myself, and I sat there and like counted and wrote down what the screens were that I had to go through in order to even like print my boarding pass and get like the little tag for my bag, which is a whole another user story you could write about.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I think that helps potentially the UX person behind the scenes too, because they can come to it and say, look, they like wrote the user story right for me.
They've already done it for me.
They've done it. Here you go. Can we just put that in?
And this is probably one of the rare instances I feel like that you would be able to submit feedback like that, and it might potentially get to the right person, and they can start trying to make changes. So that's actually a really great idea.
Yeah, especially with this 4th story. We'll talk about that.
But, woo! So Nick, what have you been up to?
So you and Elise did a great job covering. You also talked about voting. I don't even want to get into that.
It's very frustrating for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ballot thing is still blowing my mind.
It astounds me. There's like national guidelines for that stuff, but there's no standards.
Oh, yeah, that seems to be a problem.
So that feels like something that maybe should be tackled.
But it was funny for me doing a retrospective on it, right? Because a lot of people were kind of up in arms about like Florida had to do a recount because they're having problems with their ballot. But when I was filling mine out, I was like, I could see why this happens. This is not the most straightforward thing to fill out, and you can make mistakes with a pen very easily. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to comment on that. But you guys did a fantastic job holding down the fort while I was gone. I kind of, after that, went off the grid. Not completely off the grid, obviously, but I completely neglected my emails and notifications on my phone and just kind of went heads down and played games for 2 weeks. And it was fantastic.
What all did you play?
Well, I played a lot of Red Dead, and
of course you did.
A new Pokemon came out, so of course
it did on Switch.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And then Smash Brothers is coming out. I already bought some Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales too. It's like
that I'm really excited for.
It's so much stuff to play through. But anyway, being off the grid is really kind of freeing, and really made me realize how dependent on technology I am on a daily basis. Like, I'm checking every news story on my RSS feed. You know, we're doing this podcast, so we have to interact in some form with the community. So if you've noticed an absence on on our Slack, that's why I haven't been as active. And hats off to the Slack community. They've just been going. Mateo's just been posting, and a lot of the stories that we've actually sourced for today
just
is
throwing down.
Been through them. But yeah, so thank you all to being active while I was not. It's kind of nice to kind of see something go even when you don't have fuel to feed it.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing to do to take a break from all that stuff, because I tried to do the same thing from like Instagram, email, Twitter to some degree, even though like we talked about, our Twitter seemed to explode over the holiday. I don't know really why,
all the
but
new
thank
Twitter
you.
followers. That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's good for you, like getting away from all that stuff that we have to interact with, and sometimes some of it causes like stress or anxiety, depending on if it's email or like Teams. Or whatever, maybe
there were a couple emails that came through. One of which I'll describe here in just a minute. But there were a couple emails that came through that I were just like, ooh, don't know if I want to deal with that right now, and so I guess I wasn't completely off the grid.
Yeah, but it's good to be off when you're off, right?
Yeah,
as much as you can, anyhow.
So speaking of emails, this was one good email that came through, and I just want to let all of you know, all of our listeners know, I have kind of volunteered, stepped up. I don't know what the word for it is. I am now the chair of the Future Annual Meeting Committee. So the goal of this is to analyze the HFES annual meeting and kind of make recommendations to improve it, with the aim to kind of utilize what HFES is doing well and also what can be improved. So why am I telling you all this? Well, I was kind of approached for this. Both Blake and I were, and we were approached because we have a direct conduit to you, our listeners. So right now, I'm going to ask you guys to kind of solicit feedback. I have all my social channels. You can reach at us at Human Factors Podcast. Basically, what I want to do is source any ideas that you guys have, the community, bring it all together into one place and kind of synthesize it into plans going forward. This could include like online options for different parts of the conference. This is something that Blake and I have talked about. More attention spent on how to better suit practitioners and students, changes in format of some of the conference sessions or anything like that. It could be anything. If you have ideas, let me know. I'm literally going out there trying to get it from you guys because they want to hear from you. They want to make this thing the premier event in our profession. They want this the place to be. And this is UX. This is human factors in its best form, in its most meta form, I would argue, because it's human factorsing the human factors conference.
Oh my goodness, you can
through
people's minds.
The Human Factors podcast with human factors practitioners. I don't know.
Philosopher Nick Roome's on the podcast today, kids.
It seems really progressive to me. So please reach out. Let me know if you have any ideas. Happy to source those and throw them up the chain. Both short and long-term goals we're looking for. So anything. If you have innovative ideas, send them our way. And with that, Blake, do you have anything else to talk about?
Just to piggyback on your questions to the community, I mean, I don't really have a sense of how many people that listen to the show are members of HFES or have gone to the conference, but it might be worth asking, like, why, if they aren't a part of it or have never gone to a conference, why, and what would make it more appealing, more enticing.
Absolutely, yeah. If you haven't gone, what's stopping you? What do other conferences do that HFES doesn't?
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
Also valuable. Okay, Blake, it's been a while, so you know what time it is.
I'm not really sure. It's been too long.
It's time for Human Factors News. This is the part of the show where we talk about everything related to the field of human factors. This could be aviation, VR, transportation. I almost said all the things. What else did I miss? Oh,
psychology.
And chatbots. Check that.
And chatbots.
Chatbot psychology, you name it. As long as it relates to the field of human factors, it's fair game for us to talk about here on this platform. Blake, what do we have up first this week?
All right, so if thousands of years of human storytelling is anything to go by, waking the dead is rarely a good idea. From ancient Greece to Black Mirror, fiction tells us that there are drawbacks in summoning loved ones from the grave. But tech entrepreneur Maris Urasace, apologize if I messed your name up, is working to turn these kinds of tales on their head and actively working to make digital copies of the dead. He actually started taking courses at MIT, which is where he got the inspiration for this grand venture called Intermine. The company hopes to make people virtually immortal by creating digital avatars of people after they die. At the moment, the startup takes the form of an app which collects data about you, and it does so in two ways. So automatically harvesting heaps of smartphone data and by asking you questions through a chatbot. The goal is obviously to collect enough data so that when the technology catches up, you will be able to be created as a chatbot avatar after you die, which your loved ones can also interact with and feel like you're still around. So, Nick, this is kind of an interesting story because this whole chatbot idea is only kind of captivated by two companies. Another one that they mention is a competitor called Replica, but it's actually brought up by these two specific and very different individuals experiencing some kind of tragedy in their life.
Right.
And they wanted to kind of keep the spirit or keep some of the mind of the person alive who had died. And so chatbots seemed like a great option.
Yeah, so one quick note. I think this company is called Eternomy.
Eternomy. Grand.
So this is have you seen this Black Mirror episode that kind of deals with the same thing?
No, I haven't, but you gave a great synopsis of it earlier.
Yeah, so it's essentially this, right? Haley Atwell's character, she's dating General Hux. Forget his name. Oh, anyway.
Yeah, I don't know his
ginger
name.
guy, older Harry Potter brother.
No clue.
Domhnall Gleeson. I remembered it. I didn't even look that up, folks. So anyway, Haley Atwell's character is dating Domhnall Gleeson, and he dies fairly early on in the episode, and she's grieving, and someone mentions this service that is strikingly similar to this. Whether or not chicken and egg, who knows? But this is interesting to this concept is interesting to explore, because in the episode, at least, they go on to explore, well, what if, how does a grieving person deal with life after death for somebody who was so close to them, right? Like, I think in this example, they're talking about a friend, right?
Yeah, they're talking about a good friend.
But, like, think about someone who's a loved one, right? And then what does that mean later on in the episode? This isn't a spoiler, I guess. I don't know. It's been out for a couple years, so whatever. If you don't want Black Mirror spoilers, skip forward 30 seconds. Anyway, so they eventually, the service comes around and say, hey, we're experimenting with this new thing. You can put that chatbot in a body that's modeled after the person. And, how does basically interacting with a robot that walks, talks, and feels like the person that you were with, exploring sexuality and interpersonal connections with somebody that's not really the thing. It's a facsimile of what that was. And so, it's interesting concept, and there's a lot to break down. I still don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, and I think the second part of it is where it starts to get really fuzzy for me, right? Because now it's not just a chatbot that you're interacting with and being able to talk back and forth with and reminisce about memories. It's when you're putting in a robot and you start almost living a new life with something that's not actually the person that you used to know. It's something different.
Right.
It's something unexplored and new.
Yeah.
And what does that really mean, and what does that mean for human relationships, right?
And that was kind of explored, but I mean, we won't know, obviously, until it becomes a reality. And
then you have to just start dealing with how to process all that kind of stuff.
It's weird to think about Black Mirror in the sense of like, yeah, it's future. I don't know if it'll happen, but I mean, it explores things that are very tangentially related to the concepts that we're experiencing in our everyday life. And I just don't know how I feel about this. Like, it was a novel concept when I saw the episode, and it's still a novel concept when I'm looking at this news story and trying to really, like, think about it. Like, what if we made a Blake chatbot? And
thank goodness, can it work for me?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what if, God forbid, something happened to you, and I was devastated, and I made this chatbot of everything that you've ever written or texted or whatever.
Thank goodness we have all the podcasts.
Yeah, that would be a auditory blueprint of your voice. And what if the chatbot was good enough to interact with me on a podcast?
It probably would be.
Yeah. I mean, at least in the very surface level at which we tackle these things, right? Because you're just reacting to me.
Basically, yeah.
You're giving some analysis, and the same for me, right? Like, we're giving some analysis on the stories, but for the most part, it's just you and me talking and reacting to each other. So a chatbot that does that same thing is not far off. So what if I had a chatbot that did the same thing? We could just port our alter
How do they
egos
not know that we're not
every
both
Monday.
chatbots right now?
How do they know?
They don't.
They don't. We could be.
Because we're actually now getting sponsored by this startup.
Yeah,
no, that's just
exactly.
a joke.
But yeah, I mean, the concept is there. I don't know how I would, if I would do it. Like, first, let's explore that if.
I don't really know. So here's the part that I think would be fun, and maybe it wouldn't work, but it'd be fun to interact with the four of us, right? So you and me, the human versions, interacting with our two chatbot counterparts on a podcast type of thing, and seeing how listening to your own potential interactions and how they evolve over time. Because the way that I think about it, and this is probably going to be telling about how much my lack of knowledge in the field of like AI and machine learning.
Right.
But I would assume that they start to kind of develop their almost kind of personality.
Well, yeah, and I'd imagine there's some feedback mechanism. Is like Blake would never say something like that. Why did the chatbot say that? He would never say something like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, where does that get into the data set, and how does all that information? And they referenced I think the Microsoft chatbot that got a hold of Twitter from, I think it was called Tay, right? That had so many problems because of the data that it was pulling in.
Racist, sexist,
yeah.
all that, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. It would be an interesting kind of thing to do, but I don't know, in terms of replacing somebody with it, and even trying to do more than like reminisce with that thing it's a struggle for me for some reason. And it shouldn't be, because I mean, there's like some people that I would love if they were alive today and to like have a conversation, if you will, with them.
Right. I don't think you would ever be able to have like deep conversations with somebody. I think it would be very surface level-y. Like, yeah. Like, I think, in some of the videos I was looking up for the sources for this episode was very surface level, like, hey, what'd you do today? Or do you remember that time we went surfing? And then they would send back a picture from that time, right? And that's cool. And it's, I guess, if it's treated correctly and, it's completely transparent that this is not the person. This is just a service. Like, there's going to have to be disclaimers. So, like, because you have the issue of digital identity, digital privacy. That data is yours, and if you're consenting to it, you have to consent to being using it after you're dead. And I mean, like, this is a whole thing, right? Even with like actors, they're digitally scanning their bodies before they do movies in case anything happens to them. They're waiving their rights to their physical appearance after death, so that way they can be used in movies, right? I don't know. It's a really interesting sort of legal, ethical area that we're not going to answer on the show, but it's... Yeah,
and I feel like the cybersecurity problem gets into a little bit of this, right? Because the information they talk about kind of collecting is like anywhere from your geolocation, motion, activity, health app data, your sleep data, photos, messages, blah, 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 and stuff that they can collect from Facebook or other external social media sources. What if any of that stuff is altered? And that changes who you actually are in this kind of chatbot world. And you're not necessarily the same person. But you're dead and you can't necessarily do anything about it.
Right. Or what if somebody, like, even from the cybersecurity... When you said cybersecurity, I thought this was the way we're going, as if someone tapped into that system and was able to ask a loved one personal questions to get access to perhaps bank accounts or anything like that. So, yeah, that's all issues.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about for sure. And I don't know. It's cool that these two kind of separate companies are tackling this problem, but as far as where it goes from here, I don't even really know how to answer the question or how I feel about it.
Yeah, I don't either. I kind of want to bring in some of the comments from the Slack if they're applicable, since we did kind of pull most of these from there. I don't know if there were any on this one. Brian just says it's a heartbreaking story.
It really is.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the people who are closest to me. I don't know necessarily, like, I love them very much. I don't know if, for me, that would be a healthy relationship. I think that if they are gone, I cope better knowing that they are gone and knowing that there's not really, I don't know, man. Like, I wouldn't want to use this service to talk to anybody that's dead. Personally, like, that's where I'm at right now. If it becomes like something as ubiquitous as online dating, then that might be a hurdle that I might have to get over, right? Like, there was a huge stigma against online dating when it first came out. Now it's like the way to meet people.
Yeah, it's normalized at this point.
And so will this follow a similar pattern? If so, like, that's a big hurdle that I feel like I have to overcome. But like, kids growing up 10, 20 years from now, that'll be part of the thing. Oh, grandma's died. We have her chatbot we can talk to. You can say goodbye that way. Like,
yeah, or you can learn about the person you never got to meet that way.
Yeah, exactly.
And that kind of stuff. So on that side of it, I'd be excited about it, because like, you could, I don't know, like, I never met either one of my grandfathers, so maybe through something like this, although they wouldn't have the necessarily data to put into this, but it'd be somebody you could get to to some degree know through basic kind of things.
Right.
Just asking questions. But yeah, I kind of fall in the same camp that you do. I don't really... I feel like there's something comforting where you have to rely on your own memories of a person once they're gone. And I feel like I could fall into the trap of abusing is not the right word, but becoming obsessed with this for certain people that I loved, right? They were gone. They were really important in my life.
I'm going to say let's table this discussion because I know what we're doing for Infinite tonight. We're watching that episode. We're going to be breaking it down.
All right.
With this article in mind. All right. Well, what's up next?
What is up next? All right. Here we go. Sorry. Okay. So medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the United States, with some studies citing numbers as high as 250,000 annually. So many studies have begun to increasingly look at the misuse and adverse events associated with medical devices. And a report from the World Health Organization analyzing the challenges of increasingly complex technology notes that the primary reasons for adverse events with new tech are not only the result of improper training or longer learning curves, but also poor design. So it also highlights an important implication of a challenge. So medical devices are prevented from achieving their full public health potential due largely in part to design challenges or improper design. So a contributing factor to these challenges and errors made with complex medical devices is design and interface between humans and technology. This, of course, is where human factors comes in. So, however, the process of human factors within the medical device design community is relatively primitive, slow, and expensive. At its core, this type of testing is a form of prototyping and is similar to many concepts within user-centered design. The core prototyping is frequently highly iterative user testing of representations of the actual product in question. And the challenge is you're testing a product that's not necessarily finished, so there's sacrifices that need to be made in order to minimize the time and the cost that it costs between iterations. And this article talks about VR might be an apt solution for this. So I think this is a great application of VR, especially for people like us in the field, right? I mean, neither one of us work in medical technology right now, but I feel like the sake of prototyping some physical product and being able to do it more and perhaps kind of replicate the context through VR that somebody might use a physical product, I think it's only going to help our case in how we kind of, bid for contracts or any of that kind of stuff.
Quick plug. We talked to Adam Brawley, the Human Factors Prize winner, about using VR for testing ISS tools.
Yes.
And I feel like that same application, if you think about it just in different fields, right? This is the application in a medical field where you can sort of interact with the thing before it's built, so that way you can understand how, it's going to work or how people will use it. I feel like you and Elise also talked about this from the Healthcare Symposium earlier this year, didn't you? Or something similar?
Well, we definitely talked about the fact that, medical errors in general are the lead cause of death, and that medical device testing is part of the problem that's related to that. Like either not being able to do enough iterations or not taking into account context. So we definitely talked about that. But Nick, I treat you as my resident VR expert because you know far more than I do.
That was a weird reaction. I'm sorry.
So the thing that I worried about when I read this article is has there been like a very good transfer rate of things like this where you're learning in a virtual environment and then you bring it into the real world?
It kind of,
are you going to say it?
Yeah, he's going to say it.
God!
It depends with, on a variety of factors, first off. Yeah. But exactly how you're interacting with the thing, how high is the fidelity of the interaction, right? It doesn't necessarily matter about graphical fidelity, but the interaction fidelity, that's kind of important. So if you're operating on, let's say, if you're using a device that, let's say you're using a Joy-Con or something for a controller or something for this interaction, you can get kind of workflowy steps, but you can't get how the actual device will work with the thing. I'm doing a lot of hand talking now.
Is that like a feel problem or a misunderstanding of really how the device is going to work? Like you're able to see what you're actually making happen, but it's not the same as actually holding the real device or the real object.
It's the whole procedural memory versus what's the other memory? I'm drawing a blank on my memory.
I want to say semantic memory, but that's not right.
Yeah, there's the knowledge, and then there's the how do I do it?
Yeah.
Those two things. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not prepared, but I'm not a true psychologist. So it comes down to those things, right? If you have just the controller, you would get the knowledge of like this is how the thing works. But with an actual prototype, let's say you 3D printed a device, and you mapped it to a virtual environment where the device is actually present, and you're actually you're actually interacting with that 3D printed prototype. Then you would have that procedural memory and be like, okay, well, I press this button to make this thing happen, and this button to make this thing happen, and so it's different, right? So that's one way that this knowledge could transfer over. Excellent.
I think the part that I'm interested in, and I don't know if this is interesting to you or any of the listeners, but
no.
I want to. Of course, it's not interesting to Nick if it's coming out of my mouth. But the thing that I wonder is. If you actually you could convince somebody to do this, to like let you kind of build your prototypes in VR, what's like kind of the cost benefit analysis of that? Could you prove that this is much better and much quicker in terms of like creating prototypes and creating stuff in relatively good fidelity? So like Nick was talking about, you have a good transfer of knowledge. Or is it just going to be just as expensive as the problems that you're seeing in places like the medical field, where it's a slow process, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money? Because I would argue that it's going to, if you have the right professionals with you, in addition to the human factors practitioner, like helping you build these environments and build these kind of products, that it should really enhance your ability to create better devices.
Oh, hands down, yeah. I mean, anytime you can reduce the testing costs of a device, you can test more. You can test more of that thing.
Exactly.
And you can have more iterations without having to go through all of the production costs, right? You can just... Prototyping is huge, right? Because there's a reason why people prototype, is because you can find out whether or not something works before committing to that design.
It's kind of the lifeblood of what we do.
Right. And while there is resources in building, like, let's say a 3D model or a 3D printed replica of that 3D model, I keep making fingers at this like imaginary device. Like, I don't know how you'd hold it, but I'm sure there are different ways. I don't even know what I have in my head, but there's some device, right? And you can
make holding something.
You can make that different ways. And let's say it's clunky to use in the first iteration. Well, you can, everyone knows iteration. You can do more things with less money if you have a prototyping tool that allows you to explore how it can be used. And virtual reality is that tool.
Yeah, and you might even be able to get a little more dangerous even. Like if you're doing prototyping, maybe you can now do A/B testing if you get to a point in the prototyping cycle where you're like, oh, well, what if I could just test these two options?
If you get that far ahead of the curve, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe one's better for, nurses or just surgeons. I know that's a horrible example.
Yeah.
But like stuff like that, I feel like there's no end to the possibilities. And this is only really talking about the medical field. I feel like this could be applicable for the DoD and the military, or even all the way to... just maybe, I'm sure, probably automotive design. That's one thing that I think of when I think of this. But sometimes I wonder if that's even going to be a problem anymore, since we're going to go all super autonomous.
Yeah, I don't know, man. There's always going to be people who need to work on cars, unless there's always going to be people that need to diagnose cars.
True. No matter if they're electrical or not.
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. So before we move on, though, I just want to say, like, if this topic interests you, I am going to plug some of our HFES 2018 coverage, because we also talked to David Azari, who is the Alphonse Chapanis Best Student Paper Award winner, and he was looking at surgical performance on hand motions, and that's kind of related to this topic here. And also, I mentioned Adam Brawley. So if you're interested in the VR aspect or the medical aspect, I'd say those are two great interviews that you can go listen to from our coverage of HFES 2018. Blake, do you have any other thoughts on this guy here before we move on?
No, I just really want to see this being applied all over the place. I feel like if I had the chance to get involved in VR and prototyping, I would jump in hands first.
Yeah, you know me. I love my VR, and we'll be talked to back about more VR right after this.
VR more.
Human Factors Cast strives to bring you the best in human factors chatter every week. We pack news, interviews, reviews, and overall fun conversations into each and every product that we put our seal of approval on. But we can't do it without you. You see, the Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running this show come from the listeners. That's why we're giving back to our supporters on Patreon, now more than ever. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like 24/7 access to our exclusive Human Factors Cast Slack channel, personalized professional reviews, and Human Factors Cast Infinite, a Patreon-only podcast where the topic is human factors, etc. We're always updating our rewards, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you all, and remember, it depends.
Yeah, Patreon. Go check that out, because tonight, like I said, we're going to be talking about the Black Mirror episode. We're going to be listening to that, having commentary on that. It's going to be pretty fun. Thank you to all of our friends over that. That was a rough cut. Sorry, I don't know. I
liked it. It was
moving
good.
on. I was moving on. It's almost like, I snipped the show. I didn't. Jeff, I didn't snip the show.
Even though it sounded like it.
I just want to thank all of our friends over at Business Insider, MDDI Online, Ars Technica, and the Canadian National Research Council for all of our news stories this week. If you guys want to follow along, you can follow us on social media or join us in Slack, because that's where Mateo posts all these things, at least what we pulled for this week, for links to the original articles.
Yes.
All right, Blake, well, what do we got up next? I hinted at more VR.
Yep, so we're forgetting VR treadmills and we're just going straight for VR sneakers. So virtual reality is ever going to become the immersive holodeck platform that we all dream of. Someone is going to have to figure out locomotion. Today's options for locomotion in virtual environments include omnidirectional treadmills, perambulators, and subtle tricks to mask the user from their actual movement in the physical environment. Well, a new patent from Google suggests that an alternative idea in the form of motorized VR shoes may be coming. So Google's patent describes what essentially are motorized VR roller skates that will let the user walk normally while the motors and wheels work to negate your natural locomotion and keep you inside of the VR safe zone. The shoe solution would track the user's feet just like how VR controllers are tracked today, and the tracking would know when you're too close to the virtual walls of your VR area, and the system would then wheel you back into place. All right, so we got through perambulators.
We did.
But Nick, seriously, this is so I kind of laughed when I saw this come up in the feed and said it to you this morning, like this is something we should talk about. But this seems like an awesome idea and way less expensive than something like an omnidirectional treadmill.
Yeah, I didn't laugh. This is a great idea.
It's a super cereal for Nick.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, so I want to tackle a couple things. Let's first talk about the traditional methods for interacting with VR. So you have, like you mentioned, Blake, omnidirectional treadmills, which are platforms that move under your feet in reaction to the direction that you are moving. So as you move forward, the platform moves backward and keeps you in the same place. With a perambulator, that is basically a concave surface in which your feet, you can walk in any direction, and your feet will, with low friction, basically push you back to the center of that concave surface. So if you imagine like a bowl, you're basically standing in a bowl and your feet go up to the side of the bowl and come down. So you can walk against the side of the bowl and your feet will slide back down into the center. That's a perambulator.
Now, have you ever experienced that? Because that would seem like to me like it wouldn't feel natural.
It feels natural enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird. There's also methods of like masking your physical senses to make you think that you're walking in a straight line when in reality you are actually walking in a circle. So the way they do this is they shift the frames of your visual system by a couple frames to make your body self-correct. You have to have a large space for this, though. So there's size constraints, but basically you're walking straight in the virtual environment. But because the frame in the virtual environment is, forever advancing, I guess, to the left, your body corrects to match it. And so you're walking in this big circle in real life.
Oh, but it's just tricking you. It's a straight line visually. That makes sense.
So that's another way. But this, in all those examples, minus the tricking your senses, there are restraint mechanisms to hold you upright. So there are belts that will, hold you in place. So that way you don't fall over. So Google's really got to master this whole anchoring system, because if they don't, then there's potential for disaster in the physical environment and injury.
Oh,
right?
most definitely, yeah.
So, to me, there are a couple safety issues that I'm worried about, right? So there's, well, one, I don't know if have you ever been on any of these devices that are gyroscopic and can basically keep you upright, like a Segway or something, where if you lean a certain direction, it will counter lean to keep you upright?
Yeah, so I've ridden a one wheel, which acts the same way.
Okay, how was that experience for you?
It was hard to get like a hold of the first time because I had a hard time like keeping my balance right and not like kind of like stumbling off type of thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it wasn't very simple to get the first ride or whatever.
Yeah, there's this other brand that does like these I mean, there's like hoverboards don't do it, right? I mean, some brands might, but there's these new roller skates. I don't know what they're called.
They're still making roller skates?
I don't know what they're called, man. I saw them in my feed. They were October. No. I don't know what they are.
Rocket skates.
I don't know. They're basically the same thing as this, but not aimed at VR.
Oh, okay. Just like aimed as a motor transportation or some sort of fun.
Think about two little Segways attached to your feet. That's basically what they were. And essentially, I don't know what these devices feel like where they counteract your balance. Because that's going to be key here is how do you maintain somebody's balance while they're perceiving something that's not the physical environment, right? And how do you mask that appropriately to make them not hurt themselves?
Yeah, or I guess for some people maybe even be afraid of how they're gonna feel during it. Because let's say like something does happen and you did like fall over and it kind of ruined the experience. I mean, how likely are you gonna be to try that again? So they almost have to really get this right, just in terms of keeping somebody upright within the experience.
Yeah, it looks like they have a couple safeguards in this patent to like basically pull you out of VR if things are looking dicey. You can see that at 1170 in the little patent thing there. So yeah, I don't know, man. There's a lot of hangups, but if they can get this right, I think this could be really cool.
So do you think it'll, if they get it right, that it'll likely be kind of a better solution than something like an omnidirectional treadmill?
Look, part of the problem with a lot of this VR tech is that, one, the equipment is expensive, right? Right now, VR headsets are expensive.
Yeah, for
the
sure.
The computers to run the VR is expensive. Then if you go into actually tackling locomotion, omnidirectional treadmills are ridiculous in price. I mean, like only labs have them, right? Perambulators are getting cheaper and more accessible. I think there's a Virtuix Omni is doing like $500 perambulator, so they're fairly affordable. But in addition to that cost, you have the sort of investment cost of actually getting into the virtual environment. So, and I have this problem too. I have a VR headset at home that I seldom use because it's so taxing to actually get in and get the whole thing set up, and make sure the cameras are all set properly, and make sure that the tether's working and the everything, right? So one way we can get around that is to have a battery powered headset, right? And then mitigate the lag between the rendering, and that's a whole issue. And then you have the issue of actually, if you think about the locomotion aspect of it entirely, then you have the aspect of, well, then I have to get into this belt, this restraint on this perambulator, and I have to open up the thing and get in and put on the right shoes.
Yeah, it seems like there's a high cost of entry just to even set up, much less get in the actual environment and start doing something.
And if you can just do a shoe attachment instead of a belt, the high cost of a perambulator, the storage alone is going to be worth it, right? So you don't have this huge thing sitting in your room. You just have little skates off to the side that you throw on, and that's it. And if you can get that and the headset and the battery-powered backpack, maybe, that's all you need. And then you could just, and some easy way to navigate menus while you're in a virtual environment, some easy way to switch back and forth between the virtual and physical environment. So if you have, like, the tracking map to, let's say, the actual headset instead of the environment capturing, so instead of cameras in the environment, you have cameras in the headset looking at the environment with markers. That's a lot easier point of entry, because then you can be like, this marker's over here, and then no matter where you put on the headset, you're mapped.
Yeah, not having to worry about like an external camera and all that. We'll just make it a little quicker.
Yeah, so there are definitely ways in which we are going to mitigate that cost of entry. I don't know, man. I feel like I could nerd out about all this, but what is like? Does this seem like something that you would use from somebody who you've only tried VR a handful of times, right?
Yeah, and a lot of it is I just don't. Right now, I don't see myself investing in it, only because like I don't play video games that much as I would like to, just because of time constraints and like trying to balance work-life general stuff, and then coupling that with I'm not really sure what I would use it for outside of that, even though I know there's a lot of applications beyond just playing games with a VR headset and VR gear. But the investment of, like we talked about, the computer itself, the headset, and then like the setup alone, I feel like I would hardly ever use it. Now, if we start getting a little closer to where like you've talked about, there's enhancements to the headset, maybe I know this is only a patent right now, but maybe Google produces shoes that allow you to really be a little more immersed. I could see myself maybe spending some of the money, but again, it depends kind of on price and really what I'd be using it for.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, man. I think this idea is awesome. If we can reduce that barrier to entry, let's do it, because I'm all for it.
Most definitely, yeah.
All right, we got one more story. Let's break it down.
All right. So thank you, Canada. So they're improving the air travel experience. So air transport allows thousands of individuals to connect with their families and others to explore other parts of the world. And last week, Canada's Science and Economic Development announced the launch of the new Center for Air Travel Research. The new center, managed by the National Research Council of Canada, is the world's first and only facility to study the air travel experience from start to finish, from check-in to terminal to security to boarding to flying and to planing. The Center for Air Travel Research provides the aerospace industry with a flexible, collaborative space to develop, integrate, and evaluate aerospace technologies, systems, and materials. So this facility will allow companies to evaluate a passenger's complete air travel experience to improve safety, efficiency, and comfort for Canadian travelers and visitors. Nick, I might be moving to Canada if they get this right.
Right. Well, I mean, if you think about it, this will drive not only Canadian airlines, but also national airlines, right? If they set guidelines by which airlines that do business in Canada have to adhere to, then that's a lot of airlines, right? And that will trickle down. So this is good. I'd be curious to get, let's see, are there any comments on this on Slack? I think there were comments. Oh, wait, no. I forgot to mention the comments on the wheels. Oh, well, anyway. But this is cool, because if you think about it, they're not just tackling the experience in the airplane. They're tackling the experience from, I want to print out my boarding pass. See, we're bringing it back. We're all those references that
all
we made.
The callbacks.
So they're looking at this holistically and trying to enhance the experience of the flyer. And this is government backing this, so this is awesome. I'm really digging this.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, is it really that big of a problem, or for Canadian passengers, that they've like gone to the government to help them kind of tackle it? Which I think is a great idea. I mean, I don't understand why it hasn't really been a focus, because I know for me, at least in my experience with human factors in aviation, has always been from the side of the air traffic controller or a pilot,
right,
trying to optimize and make sure that the transportation part of it is safe. Which makes sense, right? Because we were dealing with like 200 plus lives at some points, getting from place to place. But this would be great. I mean, being able to help facilitate, just checking in to getting on the plane to flying and getting off the plane will have a major impact on probably the amount of people that travel. So it could increase business, but also they're having a positive experience while you're flying is always a good thing.
Yeah, I hope they really do something about the armrests. I think we talked about this before, but there's this design where like the middle seat could rest theirs below the people on the sides that rest theirs above, and it's only like a shift of a couple inches.
Oh yeah, it's old school human factors cast now.
But I'm also looking at these devices on Amazon. Have you seen these?
No, what is this?
They are basically armrest dividers for people.
Thank goodness. I need that.
I feel like I do too, and I mean, it's sad, but we all want kind of our personal space while we're on the plane, and if they can start to basically come up with solutions that will end the problems, like the very small problems that we have that are that are difficult to deal with while you're traveling. Traveling's already stressful.
Yeah, it's already stressful, and it's just not super sanitary either. And you're like rubbing up against somebody next to you who you've never met, you don't really know. So maybe something like that makes sense. But
who knows if they got their flu shot or anything.
Yeah, and it tends to be, it feels like every time I get on a plane, I don't know about you, but everybody around me is sick. So having small things that like allow you to have more space to yourself may be helpful, maybe not.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, but I think it's a great initiative by like the Canadian government to try and tackle this because, again, I feel like the only times I've really seen a lot of effort put into is more of the safety aspect when it comes to pilots and air traffic control.
Yeah, and I mean, you bring up a great point. This is a public health issue. Too, and that's good to have government on your side for something like that because if they can mitigate, again, talking about mitigation, I feel like the theme of this episode is mitigation. Like, how can we mitigate cost with VR stuff? How can we mitigate? Anyway, I feel like this is great. This is going to make great strides towards making it a more comfortable experience, not just, like we say, not just in the cabin, but also from ordering tickets online to basically the baggage pickup, baggage claim, or even getting that last mile transportation that we talked about on the show a couple times before. Is that something that this will cover too? I mean, it seems like it.
I hope so, yeah. And especially, I'm actually not sure what the kind of autonomous vehicle space looks like in Canada, so I'm not sure if that's something they're trying to work with. But I could see that as a great way to integrate with companies like Uber if they exist, like a Canadian version exists, or some branch of Uber exists out in Canada.
Yeah, or even oh shoot! I just had something. Even like the biometric scanning that we talked about on the show too. Like that.
Hell, that comes together. To
that's
play.
So we have the TSA there behind it. If government can inform the TSA to how to basically make it seamless and less stressful for the individual, I think that stuff's good too. I don't know. This is good all around.
Loving it. Thank you, Canada, for taking on this giant initiative.
Thank you, Canada. All right, well, Blake, we have one more segment of the show.
What do we have? I forgot.
It came from...
That's right, it came from Reddit. This is the part of the show where we search all over Reddit to bring you topics that the community is talking about. Any subreddit's fair game, as long as it relates to the field of human factors and encourages discussion amongst the human factors community. So, Blake, I think we have time for... Let me check the timer. We got time for 2 of them. So we want to just take both of them.
I thought I couldn't see one or something.
No, we got both of them. All right, so we'll just do both of them here. The first one comes from the user experience subreddit from user darn it all to heck. They go on to write, at what point did you feel highly competent in this field? Blake.
This is human factors? At what point did I feel highly competent in my field?
Yeah.
Ah, goodness. Okay, we talked a little bit about this.
It all started when I was 5 years old.
Yeah, when I was 12, I knew that I would be a great HF practitioner. No, I don't know, man. I've never felt that I'm quote-unquote highly competent in the human factors field or user experience field or user-centered design, whatever you want to call it.
Well, that's a damn relief.
Yeah, I know, because it's a constant learning process, and I think anybody that can tries to convince you otherwise, you should take a second look at that person. I mean, I'm good at certain things. Like, I'm very good at prototyping, at talking to users, getting feedback, and, making inferences based off of data analysis. But I am not going to sit around and say that I'm the most competent human factors expert there is, because it's a work in progress in our field. Because like one of the articles said, like, human factors in general has been around for over 60 years, and I mean, it was really only applied in specific domains like the DoD, and it's growing. It's moving into places like medical field, like VR design, and so there's no blueprint really for how you apply this science in all these different fields. You kind of have to learn.
Yeah, I have never felt competent either. Highly competent. Let's do the highly, because I do feel competent. It's just there's everyone kind of doesn't know what they're doing. And once you realize that, I think it's a lot more comforting.
You're better off the quicker you realize that.
Yeah, I think so too. And understanding where gaps in other people's knowledge are, right? It's, for me at least, I don't know about you, Blake, but this is a very humbling field because I feel like I can approach a problem and say, look, these are the things I'm familiar with, and I think this is the best approach for it because X, Y, and Z, and someone else can come in and say, I think X, Y, and Z won't work because of A, B, and C. And then I come back and say, well, what about D, E, and F? And they're like, okay, well, let's take Z and A and maybe F.
There's a lot of alphabeting going on.
That's a lot of alphabeting going on. But you get what I'm saying is that it's a field of compromise, and there's science to back it up. But, oftentimes usability can be a subjective experience. And so if we have science that informs how humans perform better, then that's one thing. But then when you come to it and trying to tackle this novel way of interacting with something, it's no one knows.
Well, and I think that's the important part of even the idea of prototyping is you build stuff, and if it doesn't work, great, because that's the point of even doing it. And I think that's what the majority of our field is based on, like putting ideas out there based on the best science, best research we can do. But ultimately, you're at the will of people that are actually going to use a product or a service. And so you take what you know, put it out there, and then you make changes based off of that.
So I touched on it, and I want to kind of expand on it a little bit more. But I think I never feel highly competent because as information becomes more and more accessible, there is this problem of having a lot of information to parse through. And so I don't consider myself an expert on anything, like even VR. I feel like there's a variety of different subject matter that I could go and research. But I think the thing that kind of makes it okay for me to not be an expert in something is that I have the ability to go and research, and I have the skills to be able to research something like that and bring back the relevant things to the problem that I'm facing in whatever it is I'm tackling, right? And I think if you're going to, I don't like the term highly competent because that implies that, I don't know. I don't know, man.
To me, that almost implies that expert level of knowledge.
To me too,
and there's I have not done the 10,000 hours of human factors work,
right?
To even say that, or UX work or front end development work. I mean, I don't know.
Let's say this. I feel confident in my skills to go research something and bring the research to the table to synthesize that research and say, okay, I believe this is the best option because of research X, Y, and Z says so. For these reasons, and I feel confident in my ability to do that. But I feel like if anyone comes to the table in an industry profession and says, "Oh, this is the right way to do it because I'm an expert in it," well, when was the last time you researched it? What are other people doing out there in the field?
Yeah,
I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. So.
Yeah, the only way I could use highly competent is I'm highly competent knowing that I can go find and use the skills that I've been taught to try and solve a problem, and not always get it right, but know how to readjust and pivot from what I've learned.
Yeah. Anyway, if you're struggling with feeling highly competent in the field,
don't worry about it.
There are others that feel just the same way. That maybe not competent, but. I mean, not highly competent, not expert level, but definitely feeling the same way.
I guess the way that I would say if somebody's really worried about being highly competent and you don't feel highly competent, good. Just keep learning and keep improving.
Yeah, it humbles you.
That's
all right. We got time for one more, so I'm going to go with IronOmen. This is also from the user experience subreddit. So this is IronOmen is looking for some advice. They recently took a position with a company that has no formal UX on staff beyond themselves. They have been very successful to date with their community, so it's the Department of Defense, by consistently doing what the customer asked for. On to my question, or their question. Where do you start as a team with a company that may not be receptive to change initially, has huge legacy software suite, a lot of UX debt, large backlog of items, and new features being continually requested? I'm trying to get at least one more team member, but I'm sincerely worried that even that may not be enough. Leaving my company is certainly one path, but not one I prefer. I want to sincerely give it my best effort. Well, with that, we'll be back next week. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh man, yeah, that's
a tough one. Did we just?
Yeah, Jinx showed me a Coke. I don't
right.
drink Coke anymore.
Yeah. So Blake, how do you tackle this issue of basically this huge legacy software suite, lots of UX debt? You're one person trying to make a difference.
Yeah. So I feel like this is all the things I'm going to say are really obvious, but I'm going to say them anyway.
Yep.
As much as you can, try and get that extra team member, because it's going to help your cause to kind of have, two diverse perspectives potentially, walking and trying to approach the same problem from, like, in your case, a UX perspective or a human factors perspective. Totally understanding that you might not be able to get another person, because that's how it goes. Like, companies are run the way they are, and they don't always believe in change, like you've talked about. You bring up a really good point about that companies are not really receptive to change.
Not worth it.
And UX is like a big thing that companies are having to deal with, especially in older fields like the medical field, like working in the DoD, working with any kind of real legacy software. They know they need you, but they don't know what to do with you. So you're just going to have to continue to make the case of, like, you hired me, let me do my job, and this is what I can do. Now, you don't have to be very brash about it. You can always kind of tackle it in a way that makes sense based off the stakeholders that you're interacting with. And in this case, it's probably pretty interesting for you, because you're probably learning in this field for the DoD, the customer is not always necessarily the end user. Your customer may be a stakeholder or a set of stakeholders or a team of stakeholders, if you will. So the only thing that you really can do is continue to evangelize and try and develop a process that you can use. And you're going to have to, I feel like, if you want to make a big change and you want to like catch up on this UX debt and make a dent in some of these backlog items, it's going to take a lot of trying to show that return on investment and what it will do, either through trying to set up user testing or interactions with users with developers present, that kind of stuff. I feel like you've got a long haul ahead of you, but it's something that is definitely doable. I mean, I know Nick and I have worked for the DoD in various capacities for a while now, and I mean, I don't know where I would be without some of my teammates for sure, and also some of the leadership that I've had, because they really have shown me how you can interact with stakeholders to kind of make them see the light, or ways that you can kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, make them think that it was their idea, that type of stuff. And it's tough. I'm not going to lie to you that it's going to be an easy process. But if you feel like you want to be a leader in the UX or human factors field, this is a great challenge for you to tackle. I don't know, Nick, what are your kind of thoughts on this? Because this is a hard problem to really even give advice for.
I don't know. I feel like I echo a lot of the same sentiments that you had there, Blake, and I think that comes from us actually working at the same company in the same environment on some of the same projects. But honestly, it does come down to, I think you said it best, when it comes to making somebody else think that it's their idea, and then following through with that execution and providing different avenues for solving those problems that you have implanted into somebody else's brain, right? Like, I think that's the trick, is being able to communicate with the right people and bringing the ROI to those people and to kind of prove your worth. It's always evangelizing for this type of position, for this type of role. And so I think your best bet is to just kind of bring it to the table when you can, and maybe even go outside of the box and say, look, like, hey, I ran some numbers. I ran the numbers.
I did the numbers.
Here's like how this can improve this product. And, the higher up the chain you can get, especially in the Department of Defense, the better. If you can have somebody at the top level evangelizing for what you do, then you can definitely see that trickle down. And I will say that's been like one success story for us, is like, if we can get at the top level, then the results are definitely, you can definitely see them at all levels.
The one last thing I want to point out for this specific case is, in the DoD, of all like the legacy, industries you could be working in, it is going to be the hardest and the slowest to enact change in. But you have to keep kind of hammering at it to get it done. And do not, and this is something Nick hit on in the last question, but like, don't let yourself get discouraged by hearing, like, if you bring up ABC and they say, no, I think it's X, Y, and Z, or whatever it may be. Like, be prepared to have people shoot down the ideas that you have and be ready to understand what their ideas are, figure out ways that you can test them and prove that either what you had originally proposed or something completely different from both ideas is what's going to work best. I mean, it's just kind of a battle, and you can do it.
Sit down. Be humble. All right, that's going to be it for today, everyone. Let us know what you guys think of the stories this week. If you like them, thank Mateo. If you don't like them,
Thank Mateo.
thank Mateo. For the rest of you, you can join the discussion on our Slack or follow us on any of our social media channels at HFES Podcast. If you like what you hear and want to support the show or want to hear about our Black Mirror commentary, you can check us out. Leave us a review on your podcast medium of choice or consider supporting us on Patreon. And, of course, you can always reach us at our home on the web, humanfactorscast.com. I want to thank Mr. Blake Arnsdorff for holding down the fort while I was gone. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about VR roller skates?
You guys can talk to me about VR roller skates anytime in our Slack, but you can also find me on Twitter at Don'tPanicUX.
Special thanks to Jeff Olson for our video editing this week and all weeks. As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me across social media at Nick_Roome. Please take our survey about HFES 2018. And please enter that contest for 2019 annual membership. Thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Until next time,
It depends.
It depends.